Well, news today that Melbourne residents are pooling their money to pay private security firms to patrol their neighbourhoods as crime spirals out of control. In some estates, residents are paying up to $3,000 a night for guards to act as a deterrent to home invasions and car theft. Speaking of which, car theft in Victoria is up 18% this year on last year. It's an indictment on governments when citizens have to pay private security firms in order to feel safe in their own homes. Victoria is the highest taxing state in the country and yet can't provide basic law and order. What they can do is find millions of dollars for drug injecting rooms placed right beside schools in Richmond. Caleb, we're going to talk about Victoria specifically, but this seems to be a problem with crime right across the country. I'm wondering, what does Victoria have in common with all the other states around the place at the moment? Could it be a Labor government?
Oh, maybe. I mean, it's probably a bit unfair to say that because pretty much every government in the country is Labor right now, so you could say that everything that's happening is either good or bad as a result of them. But obviously it's been going on in Queensland for quite some time. Now you're seeing it borne out down in Victoria.
South Australia?
Yeah, correct. I mean, we've talked about the crime stats in the CBD where thefts have gone through the roof. Once again, car thefts have gone through the roof, break-ins and that kind of thing. You've even had the police commissioner down in South Australia trying to claim that it's not even a thing. He hasn't read his own crime stats to tell him what's going on. But what an extraordinary position to end up in, where residents are themselves paying for security guards to monitor their streets because they do not feel safe at night and there aren't enough coppers on the beat. If that is what we have come to, particularly in a state like Victoria, which is in huge amounts of debt, has excessive levels of government spending. Daniel Andrews talks about his big build all the time and there's more public servants and whatever. So they've got more public servants, but they don't have more coppers. We shouldn't have to pay extra for this. We already pay for it. It's called tax. And if we can't get the cops to come round and keep people in line, there is a serious fault.
Well, it seems like everywhere they can't get police recruits. Why wouldn't people want to join the police force, Liz?
Well, who in their right mind would want to be a law enforcer in a state that the Andrews government is making the laws? But let's see. In just last month, in the headlines, it was national crisis. Every single state is trying to get more cops, but none more than Victoria. Victoria had over 800 vacancies in their force, and the second runner-up was WA, who had just 217 vacancies. So it looks piddly by comparison, but there you go. That state quadruple the amount of vacancies in their force. And there's plenty of reasons why. They fired their unvaccinated cops. Plenty resigned because they were just sick and tired after 3 years of terrorising people sitting on park benches. Then the cops that remained were completely demoralised the day that, around the world it trended when they fired on peaceful protesters with rubber bullets. Who would want to join?
So at the same time, you can't get people to join the police force. At that very same time, you've got governments now going easy on criminals. The Daniel Andrews government, and in Queensland as well, they want to raise the age of criminal responsibility. You've got drug injecting rooms, as I said at the start, and the police in Victoria have said if they see someone with drugs near a drug injecting room, they'll look the other way. As soon as you go soft on crime, you embolden criminals.
Indeed, of course. And you've got police forces around the country essentially being politicised, and there's no greater example of that than the Victorian Police. I mean, you look at the Victorian Police Commissioner during the pandemic, he was standing up, giving speeches that sound like they were written by Daniel Andrews. It was the ultimate example of politicisation. The South Australian Police Force is exactly the same when you get to a point when you're denying that crime statistics are even real. It's become about optics as opposed to actually dealing with crime. Funnily enough, it's in your charter when you're a police force to prevent crime. We've had commissioners, including the one in South Australia, say, well, it's not our job to stop crime, it's to deal with it when it happens. Seemingly that's the attitude they're taking in Victoria as well, which is why people have taken it into their own hands to prevent the crime before it happens, and then they call the cops.
And it's that gaslighting of the community where, as you said, in South Australia, I mean, the acting commissioner the other week said said, it's not an increase in crime, it's a perception. That's not your car being stolen. You're just perceiving a stranger to drive it down. Doesn't that create a dangerous situation, Liz, where people feel like they're being gaslit by the police? They are tempted to do as people in Victoria are doing. They take matters into their own hands, and it's only a matter of time till we end up with a tragedy happening where someone assaults or worse, an offender, and then we end up with a mess in the courts.
Look, I'm all for people taking matters into their own hands, and as government increasingly fails us, not just on this front, but others, I think people have got to start becoming more independent, like we used to be, looking after ourselves, looking after each other, instead of, no matter what the problem is, constantly referring to the government and saying, why didn't you fix this? But certainly with regard to this particular instance, unless you're wealthy, you can't afford to take measures like this. So obviously these are the people in nicer areas who have quite a lot to protect and the money to do so.
Well, according to the Herald Sun, it was Kew, Toorak, Camberwell, so it's the suburbs where people can afford it.
But if they're taking it into their own hands in Wyndham, and having lived in Melbourne, I can tell you, it's not the most salubrious part of Melbourne, no slight on it, but that means people are punting up their own money when they really could be spending it on other things. And